encouraging all of the passersby to repent and be saved, and how they're damned to hell if they don't, all those things. I wonder if that's almost just like a therapeutic experience for him, because it can't be actually getting anyone on his side.
No. Right. What you're really screaming is, I'm going to heaven. I'm going to heaven. I've come with vitriol to today's meeting.
Oh, what else is new?
I'd like to read you a comment on one of my YouTube videos.
Okay.
So I posted a video, and the video was about someone who had passed away. And I made a video saying, this is what grief looks like. And it was intended to be, I thought it was a somber, educational, reflective video on the grief process. And most people write back and they go, hey, thanks for posting that, or I can relate to that, or I see grief differently. But one person writes the following, okay? I want to see what do you think about this? Oh, I made the mistake at the start of every video. I say something like, I've missed you. As always, I've missed you. Welcome back to the channel. I'm David, whatever. Okay.
Okay.
And
so for those who don't know, you have a YouTube channel as well.
Yes, I have a YouTube channel.
That's what you're referring to. Yeah.
Yes, and I react to events in pop culture. Somebody passed away, and I was reacting to that. Okay.
Okay.
And the person writes, "You miss us? You never even read the comments we leave you. We are busy too, and if we can't take the time to leave if we take the time to leave a comment, at least take a few minutes to read them." One person said she is distressed, and you liked it. No words of comfort or compassion. Wow.
How does it make you feel, Dave?
So here's what my internal reaction is. Oh, it's a lunatic. No big deal. And then I think I go, oh my God, that lunatic doesn't know that I think they're a lunatic. And the fact that they don't know that I think they're a lunatic really bothers me. Why? I got that post. I don't know why. Maybe we can work through that today. I don't know why, but it bothers me. And it's been like 5 days, and I've written like 3 responses back. Like, I get like a snarky comment back, or like a thoughtful comment back, or I guess go scorched earth on what I think about that person's character. And then I delete it. And so I'm like sort of going back and forth on it. Anyway, I was thinking anyway, how would you react to that comment?
Even though 95% of all of the comments, the commentary, the ratings are, for the most part, within that range, whatever it might be, it is easy for people to focus on these 1 or 2 things. And I think that's what you're doing.
Okay, but kind of. So here's the part that I think I should, before we jump too far in this, you and I are psychologists. I think right now you're coming across as maybe the more thoughtful psychologist, and I'm the more unhinged of the two, but still psychologist nonetheless. So for this conversation, we're not offering medical advice. This isn't therapy. This is just 2 friends talking about psychology related things.
Right. Psychology related topics. So yeah, this is meant for entertainment and interest and nothing more.
Yes. All right. So, okay. So there's no part of me that thinks that what that person, so when someone gets a 360, I think they often go, well, do I actually do that? Oh my gosh. There's no part of me that thinks that nothing about me. There's no part of me that thinks what she's saying is reasonable. I just don't like that she got away with it. Like that she can say it, and then that she moves on through her day and is like, I got that YouTuber. And I'm like, no, that was ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? I don't like that I think she's going around her day being like, told him. I don't like that.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I guess if it was me and someone thought that or said that, I wouldn't like it either. So it's easy for me to say, get over it.
Yes.
But at the same time, that can't be the first type of comment you've received like that.
No, Rob, I get triggered with this kind of stuff like once every 2 weeks.
There we go.
Somebody will say something crazy. and historically, I've reacted I've been more combustible around these topics, and I end up getting into the comments, and I've decided that that's not a good look. So I've tried to dial back my reactions.
Right.
So now I just sort of stew internally.
Well, or now externally.
Yeah. Or now
just on yet another platform.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, if I were you, I don't know that one person's interesting reaction, kind of priggish reaction to something that you're trying to do that is well intended and that appeared to overwhelmingly get positive reactions is worth your while. But I can understand why it is.
Yes. So I was thinking about that. I wanted to talk to you about it because I was emotionally agitated by it. And I was thinking about this call, and then I was thinking about what is this person feeling? And I feel like the emotion that she's allowing herself to engage in is self-righteousness. I think that she's stepping into a spot and being like, I'm going to take the moral high ground. This guy doesn't do what he's supposed to do. I don't like the way he shows up in the world. I'm better than him, and let me chastise him. But I feel like she's operating from a position of, I am ethically and morally, I think in her world, she's above me. Do you think that am I reading too much into that, or would you view it that way?
I mean, for those who have listened to a couple of our podcasts already, let me bring out my soapbox about social media here. I don't know that you're reacting or that you're interpreting that incorrectly. I feel that these types of interactions, these platforms rather, are ripe for these types of kind of drive-by commentary where people can say whatever they'd like to say from a place of anonymity. And to your point, they get away with it because there's really no upside for someone like you.
Yes.
Like engaging in it makes you look kind of petty. Like, okay, this dude is engaging with one comment, one person who had a ridiculous thing to say, and not engaging in it causes this to happen. What's happening right now? So it's a lose-lose.
Yes. Okay. So I have good and bad news for you. I think you're right that engaging in it is petty, and I should just move on. And you know how every one of these episodes we each pick a topic that we want to talk about?
Right.
This is my time. I have decided that we're gonna do a whole 45 minutes all about self-righteousness in an effort to sort of cleanse my soul and spirit from my frustration.
Gotcha. So I mean, it's
which isn't petty at all, right?
Right. Of course not. No, it's selfish. It's not petty. Yes.
Yeah. That's good. Perfect. I feel better with that direction.
So I was wondering what you were going to pick and why. I appreciate the story as to why this is the topic we're talking about today.
Yes.
And now I'm even more interested to get into it.
I think that self-righteousness. So I have two thoughts. When I thought about the topic, I think that self-righteousness is the root of all debate and discussion evil. So I was like, well, let me do some research and see, like, is there any data about how self-righteousness is used? Or is there a world in which self-righteousness is valuable or positive? And it's interesting because it's like in two worlds. The big one is if you're trying to create a militia or like a cult or like an unhinged group.
What was the first word you said? Trying to create a what?
A cult.
A cult. Okay.
Or like a cultic militia.
Militia. Okay.
So like so if you look at, think about a very intensely thinking groups. Okay. The research would say that whatever your baseline emotion is, if you're leaning one direction or you have no opinion, and somebody triggers you with self-righteousness, right? If you hear anger, you're very responsive to that anger, and it leads you to align further with it.
Okay.
So it's like once you're going down that, like once you're started down the conspiracy theory path, for example, if you hear anger from people, it is the most sort of provocative and most sort of aligning emotion for you to experience. So in that way, it's very influential.
So
does that make sense?
It does. Let me
Yes.
interrupt you for a sec. So what is self-righteousness? How would you describe what you're thinking when you think of self-righteousness?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. So self-righteousness is when you not only do you think that you're right about something, but you think you have the moral high ground.
Okay.
So you're operating from so you're it's not only like, oh, is this a topical debate? This becomes an ethical debate.
Okay.
So and you're now operating from the moral high ground, and you are as a human a better person because you have this perspective.
Okay. Got it.
So when they look at like the example that stands out, and the research I found was like on the I think it's called the Proud Boys.
Yeah.
Right. That group, if you look at how they interact with it, like the language they use with each other, it's all operating from a position of self-righteousness. And the idea is that the anger that they hear from each other ramps up their alignment on whatever their view is. Which I thought was interesting.
The emotion, it's just like a continuing emotion.
Yes.
Like pile on or avalanche.
You get more and more essentially aligned with your view and more discerning about other views. So they did really interesting research, which I was like, I read it like kind of repeatedly trying to figure out what they were looking at. But during COVID, when there was this concern that there was misinformation being shared, what they were worried about was that people that were aligned with kind of the political left would buy into the misinformation. And so one of the strategies was to pump out, this is in China, to pump out content that had anger as the emotion to get people to be more discerning about the right and more self-righteous about their views on the left. To create that polarizing, oh, you're one of those crazy people.
Oh,
and
wow.
We're over here, right? And it ends up, it's a very divisive sort of strategy to get people to align one way or the other.
I mean, I don't know that I could have explained it or thought about it or I have thought about it that way before, but when you describe it that way, it makes a lot of sense. You know, you can think about, you know, when you're in any situation, most people, their first interaction with a situation is not logic. Right. It's emotion.
Yes.
And so it makes sense that if you help keep people there, if you're trying to activate or trying to, you know, create, you know, support for a cause, that you would take advantage of this aspect of how we're wired as people.
Yeah. I think it's like the question is like, how do you get yourself out of that? Because I know that whenever I debate, I really feel, and I actually honestly believe that I am different than everybody else in this way. I think that all of my opinions are 100% data oriented and fact based. And I think everybody else is a crazy person that's just driving off their emotions. And I really feel like if I shove my facts in their face, that they're going to go, oh my God, I'm so stupid. How did I missed that one fact that David pulled when he was down, you know, looking through his encyclopedia of facts. Right. But that's how I really feel about it. And what's interesting is if I guess what I think, and I'm curious what you think, is my sense is that as I get more self-righteous that way, when I feel like I have the high ground intellectually or morally or whatever, you know, we'll talk about in a second, am I actually influencing somebody who's on the other side? But aren't I also like deluding myself into thinking that I'm more and more right? Do you know what I'm saying? I get self-righteous and I get further. If it influences everybody else around me, it must also sway my own thinking.
For sure. I think a line I'll sometimes use when I'm talking to people about this is, you brought a fact to an emotion party. And And more parties are emotion parties than they are fact parties. In fact,
Yeah.
there aren't that many fact parties.
Yeah.
So thinking of this, so you talked about this thing that has activated you, that has caused you to be more self-righteous. So is that what you're saying, is that your self-righteousness comes back to more of your, hey, I'm right, your ego? You get self-righteous about how you approach conversations, or am I not hearing that correctly?
No, you're hearing it right. I'm just feeling stupid because that's not what I thought, but I think it might be what's happening. What I thought, the reason why I brought that up is I was like, this person was self-righteous. She didn't like me. She thought that what I was doing was unethical and that she had the moral high ground. So when I posted, a really benign YouTube video, she scrutinized it and she fabricated something to be mad at me about. That's what I thought. And then you said that, I'm going like, well, oh my God, well, maybe I am self-righteous about the fact that I'm adding value with my YouTube video, and how dare anybody critique what I'm saying, right? And it's interesting that you just said, I go, oh, maybe I'm doing the same thing, where I just go, I said that they're a lunatic and they're out to right? I'm not saying maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe I should comment more. You know what I mean? I no part of me at all engaged. I didn't for 1 second take her seriously. I just said, you're crazy and I'm not interested. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? So we're both kind of separating further and further away.
But, that's a pretty normal response to something like this. I think of, I mean, I have joked on this podcast before that my ego is in, my intellect and my ability to, outwit, to know more, all those things. I would say, especially when I was younger, at least I'd like to think, that was a lot worse. I remember having, so one of the topics I would get most self-righteous about, particularly in my 20s, honestly, it started when I was a kid, was around environmental issues. So I remember getting t-shirts as like, tree hugger t-shirts as like a banner of pride, even as a kid. One of my earliest memories, this is like 1992 or something like that. I'm in like second grade. I get this book of postcards. I don't know who it's from. I should ask my parents, see if they remember. They probably don't. And it's a book of postcards, and it's all of these sad pictures of pollutions and oil spills and things like that. And then I think it's at the back of the book, there are the addresses, right? This is back when you would actually mail postcards. There's the addresses of all of these companies and corporations that are causing all of these negative environmental outcomes, and you write to them. And man, I think I don't know how many postcards were in this thing. I can't remember, but I went through the whole damn thing. Every company in that book got a postcard from a 7-year-old in 1992. That was pretty righteous. And obviously had critically thought through the process and the complexity of it all.
I feel like you were and the more I hear about your childhood, you were a very interesting kid. Really into maps and the environment, and
always. But so fast forward, I would have conversations with people in high school. I would say particularly in my 20s, environmentalism was a big part of how I voted and things like that. And it wasn't until maybe 6 to 8 years ago where, I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, I'm still a bit self-righteous about that. I think, and I think I give off that feel more than I think I do. So as an example, I just moved. I have a new house, moved in 6 months ago. We become pretty good friends with our neighbors. And like 2 weeks ago, our neighbors were over, and they have little kids playing with my little kids. And I had to go, I forget where I had to go. I had to go somewhere. So my wife and the two neighbors and the kids were over, and it was around lunchtime. And so my wife's like, hey, do you guys want some lunch? And the guy goes, I mean, do you have anything besides kale and hummus over here? Or is there something else?
Yeah.
And she told me that. And I was like, I mean, how did that come across already? How, like, what am I doing? That's just, and he particularly pointed to me. And I was
Yes.
like, well, that's all Rob eats, right? It was like, and I'm like, no, you've not seen me Cookie Monster a whole bag of goldfish crackers before, but but you already are kind of catching on to this, granola-y vibe that I try not to give off, but apparently all over the place.
I think that I can smell patchouli on you from here, Rob.
I don't know what patchouli is, but I can understand from the context clues what it might mean.
Well, first of all, I mean, I always thought, getting to know you, that you're a little bit on the hippie side.
Yeah.
And now that I know you, I continue to believe that you're on the hippie side. Okay? So I believe your neighbor has read you accurately. So we sort of talked about it, like we recognize that if people agree with you, self-righteousness is really good at getting you more aligned with your pre-existing view. The research would also show, which I thought was fascinating, that it also makes you a better problem solver as far as evaluating arguments that are against your perspective.
Oh.
So if you are if you're an environmentalist and you are self-righteous about your environmental beliefs, when somebody challenges those beliefs, your ability to suss out accurately, objectively, the facts behind their argument actually gets better. Which I would have thought would make you blindly reject everything.
Yeah, me too. I would have thought that too.
More discerning. So you're still rejecting, though. You're not good at evaluating why your argument is wrong, but the quality of your thinking actually goes up.
The quality of your thinking as it relates to
your view.
Your view is higher, and the how the other view is wrong.
Yes,
is higher.
Yes, yes.
This sounds like something that's core to my identity, because I can do that at drop of a hat. Everyone's wrong.
Yeah. Shut down
every most all the time.
Yeah, you just move through the world that way. Everybody's wrong.
If people just listened and did what I told them to do, everything would be just fine. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So I was thinking about this and I was going, okay, so it's valuable as far as getting people more aligned with their pre-existing views.
Right.
It's good at fending off other, alternative views. Of course, the question is so why are we, I guess here's the question is, why do we use strategies to influence that are not effective at actually changing people's minds? Because being self-righteous never changes somebody's mind. You know what I mean? It's like we use it works if you're already somebody's already on the bus with you, it's great.
Reinforces.
But it's not, reinforces, but it's not good at ever convincing someone to join the bus. I can't think of a time when if I get a whiff of somebody thinking that they have the moral high ground, like there's just no, I then get the moral high. I think it immediately elevates both people, and now we become very discerning about the opposite person's perspective, and then don't engage.
Yep. I think so too. Like today I was walking around my office to grab some lunch, and there's oftentimes a couple blocks away a gentleman who is encouraging all of the passersby to repent and be saved, and how they're damned to hell if they don't, all those things. And then it strikes me that I wonder if that's almost just like a therapeutic experience for him, because it can't be actually getting anyone on his side.
No. That's interesting. Yeah. What's the psychological mechanism about like wanting to do that? You're just validating. I guess you're just validating yourself. Right. What you're really screaming is, I'm going to heaven. I'm going to heaven.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's a great way of putting it. Actually, is it's a win-win for him, because either he does convert someone, or someone's interested in what he has to say, or it reinforces for him what he already knows, is that he's better than everyone else walking and passing him by on the street.
Yep. There's a book I read called How to Change Minds by an author named David McRaney, I think.
Okay. Not familiar.
He wrote, he really cool. He was looking at he was looking at how do we convince people to buy into our views and perspectives. And so he wanted to learn more about people with really intense views. So the place he went, one of the places he went was to Westboro. Was it Westboro Baptist Church in Kansas?
Oh yeah,
right.
yeah.
So he went there, and he thought that it was going to be one thing, that if it was very different than what he thought it was going to be. He thought they'd be out there with pitchforks yelling at everybody, but he said that it was a really calm and relaxed church. People were very kind, right? And right across the street from their small church, there was somebody out with a rainbow flag, and he was going, there must be constant battles. And the answer is, no, there's not, because they're neighbors, and the people at the church value their neighbors. And so while they are out there being really provocative and, chanting at the funerals of vets, or chanting at the funerals of, someone who's gay, who's passed away, right? They're very provocative in that way. But what he noticed was, and I'm sure I'm butchering this a little bit, but what he noticed was, human to human, they're very reasonable people. And so he was doing some research on that. And then he was looking at, do you remember, the years I'm going to get wrong, but let's just call it during the Clinton era, gay marriage was up for debate. I believe he said that Barack Obama was voted against it. Biden voted against it. Clinton voted against it, right? Everybody was sort of voting against it. And so they were trying to figure out, how do we change the tide on this? And I think the political experience was a sort of, at 1 year, everybody was against it. And then the next year, everybody was pro gay marriage. It was everybody's views on this strongly held thing switched overnight. And the way that they did that was they did canvassing of the neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And they actually went door to door to convince voters in Los Angeles to vote for gay marriage. And once they got Los Angeles to tip, then everybody sort of followed.
That's interesting.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I have a thought about this exact topic. I don't know if it's true. It's just my intuition. Because I think one of the things that's interesting is, if you look at that as a social movement, sure, I mean, it took a very long time. But I would feel, I bet if you looked at a poll now, I'm making this up, but you probably have 70% of people who are okay with marriage between a same-sex couple.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, as we're talking about, it would have been the opposite.
Yeah.
And so you look within a generation, something happened, and it happened even more quickly than that, I think is what you're saying.
Yes.
And one of the things I wonder is, what's different about homosexuality from a lot of other identities is, you're going, in some cases, to be exposed to those folks regardless of whether you choose to or not. They could be your kid, they could be your parent, they could be your aunt and uncle, whatever it could be. Yep. Whereas if I want to be a racist, I don't have to hang around whatever group I don't like. I can choose not to.
Yes.
I guess, you can technically choose not to associate with that family member or friend that you've had for a long time who comes out, but it is a lot more difficult.
Right. You're confronted with the flaws in your thinking.
Yes. Because there is someone standing in front of you.
Yes.
Who is different.
Yeah.
And so I have always wondered, and I don't know if this book goes into that or not, if maybe the pace of that change in our society, if part of that happened because of the nature of that identity versus a racial one, a religious one, whatever else it might be.
Yeah. I read the book a while ago, so I'm sure I'm sort of destroying the story here, but what they ended up doing, to your point, that this was the sort of the strategy they learned to convince people to change minds, was, instead of going, for years, they would go to people's houses and they would say, please vote for gay marriage. And the person would say, no, it's wrong.
Right.
Moving on. And there's how do you get past them? And just goes, it's straight wrong. It's immoral. Goodbye. Close the door. And what they ended up switching to was trying to figure out what the person's right. So they moved away from the value, the sort of moral high ground. It's wrong. It's right. It's right or wrong. Right. Instead, they started figuring out, what if we just listen and figure out what the person's value systems are? and test their values against their behavior. So they would always try to figure out, what do people care about? And invariably people cared about humanity and equality and health and safety and right, all those things. And then they would just go, so how can you be so values driven and you want people to have an equal opportunity in the United States, and yet you're voting against this?
Right.
And it was, and so they're not saying you're wrong and screaming at them, but instead they're trying to align around what's the value that you have and how do I figure out which of your values doesn't fit with how you're voting.
That makes complete sense. I was listening to another podcast. I can't remember what it was, but David Brooks was on it. He's a New York Times columnist. And he has a book that has come out recently. And part of the conversation he was having with the interviewer was around political identities. And, because he's a political columnist and has been around the New York Times for a while. And he brought up a point that I think makes sense to me and probably makes sense to you, given the work that we do, is the more you point your finger at someone, tell them that they're wrong and they're bad, the less likely you are to make a change.
Yeah.
The more you're curious, you start with empathy. You start with hey, I'm going to assume this person's not a shithole or, not a terrible person.
Yes.
And I'm going to wonder why they believe what they believe.
Yeah.
Maybe through understanding that and causing them to actually have to say those things out loud. When they say them, like, oh, well, that sounds kind of terrible.
Right. Yep.
That's more likely to get, I imagine, people to, it's reflection, right? You get people to think that it's their idea. They're a lot more likely to align to it than if they think someone had to tell them or teach them how to do something.
Yes.
I'd imagine you get less, at least we've just described today, the two of us are less likely to listen to you if you're trying to suggest something. So. Yeah,
definitely. So why do you think because when you say that, like, intuitively it makes sense. Well, of course, if you tell me that I am immoral and wrong, I'm not going to be really receptive to whatever your different view is.
Right.
You know what I mean? And obviously if you show that you respect me and you engage me in a conversation and I have to see how well my values align with my behavior, then I'm more likely to shift my perspective. Like, that's logical.
Right.
But why do you think we do such a horrific job of doing that? Like, nobody argues that way. We all argue based on, even like, I can say that and I'm thinking of, like, just yesterday, I was having a political 5 minutes ago with my in-laws, I was having a political debate and I got my phone out. I'm literally having the debate with my mother-in-law going, let me show you the fact. Let me show you what this actually, but I'm not convincing her. Do you know what I'm saying?
In fact, you're doing the opposite.
I'm doing the opposite. And by the way, I do feel self-righteous. If I could, I would stand on a chair while I'm telling her, right? But that doesn't, it's a weird
good,
thing.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it feel good to feel better than other people?
Is that what it is? Do you think? Is it a self-esteem? Is it a self-esteem booster?
Good to think that this poor guy over here, he's trying his hardest, but I'm better than him. That's reinforcing for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a better person than me, although I've never been proven right there.
It's almost like it's funny because you gave the example of the guy saying, you're going to hell. And I was saying, well, what he's really yelling is, I'm going to heaven. I'm going to heaven. That's a little bit like what I'm doing with my mother-in-law when I scream at her and say, I don't scream at her. I'm very nice. But when I say, I am saying to her, I'm smarter or I'm better or I'm more ethical.
I have a fact-based argument and you can't get out of your emotional brain.
Yes.
I'm better because facts are better.
Yeah. But that feeling of self-righteousness is very much an emotional part of my brain.
Oh yeah. For sure it is.
So it's an interesting thing. I think if I had to sort of say, like, what's the tip, or like, what do we, given all of this, what do we do differently? I guess it's, at least for me as it relates to my mother-in-law, I should
a good lesson for us all.
Get off the chair and
I love you, Kathy.
Focus on the value system, because my mother-in-law and I are very aligned on value system, right? And then talk about the vote.
Yeah, I would say that is a good takeaway. Maybe to put it another way, I mean, if you're really interested in changing someone's mind, your first approach shouldn't be, pummeling them with your righteousness.
Yeah.
It should instead be, and I think this makes sense. Well, how do you know why they believe what they believe? How do you know that, you have to know them and their belief system before you can actually, change their belief system, or else you're falling on deaf ears what you're saying. So I would say it's the curiosity. It's the, well, Dave seems like a psychopath. And I think that's just true.
Yeah.
Verifiably. But why is he a psychopath?
Yeah.
That could help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Dave, there's another one in the books, man.
Thanks. That was fun.